Welcome to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. My name is Todd Dawalt, and my job here is to provide the tools and resources you need to grow your leadership skills, grow your construction business, and grow your income. Today, I interview Cesar Abeid, who is the founder and host of three podcasts in the construction and project management space. He's also the author of an upcoming book titled Project Management for You. He is an all-around sharp guy, and in this interview, he's going to offer some great advice on not only project management, personal productivity, but also the construction industry and business and leadership as a whole. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Cesar Abeid. Enjoy. All right. Well, Cesar, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Todd. Sorry, I was a little bit late there. I was trying to make it here in time for the interview. It's a hectic Friday for me.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on. We'll talk about that. So I'm not sure how you're keeping up with everything you have already. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so just a quick background on me. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and I work for Tech, Remote Monitoring Technologies, and we provide the service to the construction industry. We install, maintain monitoring systems for construction projects, and that includes cameras. So we do time-lapse photography, and we link time-lapse videos that we collect from the site to the Gantt chart of pertaining to the project. So it's a tool for project management that uses footage that we record from the site. So it's kind of a unique thing. And because it is unique, people are not necessarily searching for it online, for example. So I've always found that it was difficult to introduce what we do to potential new clients. So a few years ago, I decided to look into internet marketing and how can I make sure that the right people would find us online. And that got me started with a blog, and that was really hard to keep up. Have to, the secret of a good blog is to have good content and to have regular content. So if you're going to do it once a month, you need to do it once a month. If you're going to do it once a week, you need to be consistent. And I just wasn't. I felt like it was a bit of a chore. So that kind of died. And then I've always been a listener of podcasts. And I was listening to this one podcast where they were interviewing a podcasting consultant. And this guy said that it was, his opinion was that every business should consider having a podcast. And that really spoke to me because I think from childhood, I've always had that dream of being a radio host and being on TV. And
sure.
But engineering seemed more like a more more realistic career for me, and I liked it and I was good at it, so I went for that. But I always had that artistic, frustrated artist inside of me that wanted to do something like that. So
now that I got to stop you there. That's a little strange for an engineer to have like a creative side. Didn't they brainwash that stuff out of you at school? I mean, that's kind of the engineering school's job is to eliminate that part of the brain, right?
Yeah, the ones they can't eliminate go into architecture, right? Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't have laughed. There are some architects that listen.
Hey.
We will not go down the rabbit hole of architect jokes, but there are plenty of those. Yeah, definitely.
You know what? I admire them. I love what they do. I could never do it. And sometimes as I walk into a building that I saw the drawings for, and now it's taking shape, and I stand inside, and I'm just in awe that somebody actually thought about all that. It's I admire them, but it's kind of fun to poke fun at.
Yeah, it is, and I'm pretty sure that based on my conversations with architects, they like to take shots at us engineers as well. So it's
not very hard to do.
Definitely. So podcasting, you now have a couple of podcasts. You have the Construction Industry Podcast, right?
Yeah.
And then you also have the Project Management for the Masses podcast. So tell us about each of those.
Yes. So the Construction Industry Podcast was the first show that I created, and that was the one that is basically sponsored by Tech, by my company. So it's our reaching out into the industry, providing content. So in that show, I interview experts and people who are doing interesting work in the construction industry, such as yourself. And I've had it's been fantastic for me to do that, because I raise awareness for our company, but also I get to connect with these fantastic individuals. And besides connecting with you, I also interviewed, for example, the guy who is the current project manager for the Sydney Opera House, and the current project manager for the expansion of the Panama Canal, for example, and the chief architect for the Burj Khalifa, which is the tallest building in the world. I talked to a church architect. It's very interesting for me personally to do that, and so there are benefits for everyone, myself, for my guests, and for the listeners as well. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I decided to do a second show because I had so much fun. And but this time the show is my own show. It's not Remontech show. It's called the Project Management for the Masses podcast, and I started that in 2013. And I'm now at I think it's episode 82 that I'm producing right now. And in that show, we talk about project management in general, and it's a show for project managers. So we talk about careers, we talk about promotions, and starting a business as a project manager, and different aspects as well. So that's the bulk of my activity online. It's these two podcasts, and I have a blast doing them.
Yeah, doing a podcast for a business is a little bit non-traditional, maybe not intuitive for someone in the construction industry, but I think it's very effective. And obviously, I'm a big fan of podcasts. What are some of the benefits to the business owners? Maybe they're a supplier or a manufacturer or even a contractor who are listening. Talk about some of the benefits that you've seen with your company from having a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, podcast. So just you're really right. There is not a whole lot of. It's not trivial that people in the industry would do that. And the proof is that I started the construction industry podcast in 2011, which is a good 6 or 7 years into the history of podcasting. Since it started in 2004. And the name Construction Industry Podcast was available. So that tells you something. So there are only a few, less than a handful of podcasts out there that are consistently produced in the industry. And the main benefit is, as you know, if you are a small business owner, you try to sell your wares, right? And people, I'm sure you've heard this before, that people buy from whom they like, trust, and know, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when you create a podcast, people listen to podcasts when they're driving, or when they're cutting the grass, when they're mowing the lawn, or working out. It's a very different experience than when they're reading a blog. When they're reading a blog, they are in front of a computer, they have their cell phone, their distractions, so much so that the average attention span of somebody browsing the web is about 7 seconds, I think. And these numbers are from 2002, which that's before social media, for example. So you really, if you plan to connect with a potential client, for example, using content in a blog, it needs to be epic every single time in order for people to read it. Now, the podcast, you have their attention. They're listening to your voice for about half an hour to an hour every single week, if you do it every week. And so they're learning to trust you, to like you, and to know you, because you can't put out content every week without speaking about yourself at some point, because it comes out. And people are listening to your voice inside their head for 30 minutes every single week. So what's happened to us is that when somebody who listens to the show thinks of an opportunity that they could hire our services, the sales experience is completely different. They know me. They know what I'm about. They respect me. So there's no discussion on price. They want to work with me, even though they're competitors. They might be competitors. So if you do this right and you reach the right audience, the benefits are tremendous. But and there's less competition, because, as you said, not a whole lot of podcasts out there in this sector. So I really recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to come back to that a little bit later with maybe get some recommendations on how people can move forward with setting up a podcast for their business. But let's shift gears a little bit. You talk to a lot of folks in the construction industry. You talk to a lot of folks in project management. Tell me, what are some of the most interesting trends that you're seeing in project management today that we should be aware of?
Yeah. Project management. The word, I'm sure you've heard this before. The everybody's talking about agile, right? And
Hmm.
non-traditional methods of project management, because the traditional waterfall method works well, but it's in a fast-changing world like the one we live in today. Sometimes there's no time to plan everything before you start working. So you need to find a way to do things simultaneously and to the different iterations to create minimal viable products. So you create a bare bone product that you can sell and test, and then add on features to it as well. So there's that trend, and it's amazing. I mean, amazingly popular in software development and IT, but in construction, due to the nature of construction projects, it's a bit harder to implement. I mean, you can't start building the roof while you're doing the foundation. You have to follow a sequence of events there. But there are some things, for example, the design phase can be approached this way. And so I definitely see a trend in the project management industry as a whole going towards these agile and flexible, uh, fast project management methodologies and frameworks.
What about, are there any other trends in the construction industry, whether it's modularization, prefabrication, anything from a construction standpoint that maybe you're seeing the leading edge of, or some of the early adoption is happening?
Yeah, there's a number of things there. You talked about modularization, and I had on the show a Chinese lady. She is one of the directors for a company called Broad Group out of China. And maybe you've seen this video. It kind of went viral online a few months ago. They build these high-rise buildings in like 4 days. So they build like two stories a day, something crazy like that, using modular materials. And so there's definitely a trend there. And I've seen articles popping up here and there about how they're trying to bring this type of concept to North America. And the advantage there is that, yeah, it takes 2 days or 1 day to do one story or two stories, but there's a lot of work ahead of time in an industrial environment, right? So they prefabricate everything in an industrial environment, taking advantage of centuries now of expertise in lean manufacturing and things like that. So they keep that in an industrial environment, and then when they're ready to put it all together like Lego pieces, then they take it to the field, and they're very quick. They don't even use water, these construction sites. They're just stacking and then tightening bolts. That's all they do. So
Yeah, I actually saw a video today of a 57-story high rise that was built in 19 days.
is it in China? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the same people.
must be.
Yeah, it's a very very well produced video, and these folks are doing that, and there are other people doing it as well. So there's a trend there, and we're going to start seeing that here in North America as well. The other trends that I see is when it comes to contracting and things like that, and how we do business. Not so much as how we build things, but how we pay and how we track, and how we source and bid. So the old lowest bid mentality, I think it's on the way out. It might take a few years, but people are seeing that it doesn't work. The lowest bid is not necessarily the best value, and there are different approaches right now in order to kind of get around that old school mentality. And one of them is called IPD, Integrated Project Delivery, and it's a fascinating topic. I had a construction lawyer on the show, and we talked about this for about almost an hour. Very interesting concept in which they bring the contractor and the project manager, the owner, and some of the major subcontractors from the beginning. So they participate in the design, and they participate. I think some of these projects, they even are co-owners of the building or the project at the end. So there's a lot of back and forth before they start building, before they finish the design. So there's a lot of improved ownership of everyone involved, all the stakeholders, and there's a lot less conflict as a result. And there is also this concept of I forget the name that they use, but it's almost like a fund. So if they go under budget, they get to split it. So there's because right now, as you know, uh, when things go wrong, the only person who is not happy is the owner. Everybody else is, yay, here's a chance for a change order.
Right.
So and now they're stuck with me and I can charge whatever I want. That's usually how people make their money, because they are the lowest bidder. That means that they probably have very little profit built into their price. So they look for opportunities for things to go wrong. And that is a systematic problem, with how we do business. So this is very promising. There is an association called the Construction Owners Association of America. Mm-hmm. And I recommend everyone to check out what they do. They have local chapters all across the U.S. and they have, I think, monthly meetings. I try to go to the ones here in Michigan that is closest to me, and they have education in these type of topics, and they bring construction owners there, and it's a great way to stay in touch and try to see because the owners really is, they're directing where this is going to go, and I recommend it, COAA.org.
Yeah, actually, I interviewed the executive director of COA.
Oh, nice.
I can't remember which episode it was, but it was an interesting conversation to hear it from the owner's perspective. And yeah, the whole IPD approach. I also interviewed the executive director of the Lean Construction Institute, and we talked a lot about lean construction, IPD, and it's a whole different approach to contracting, and it's much more attractive for the owners. Shared risk, shared savings. It's a completely different model, but it's definitely catching on. It's coming.
Yeah.
And my advice would be anybody in the industry, especially in the building industry, the building construction industry, take a look at that. It's coming at you soon.
Yeah, I agree. And we talked about lean construction on the show as well. That's a fantastic, very interesting topic as well. That it's not as new, but I think people are starting to talk about it more now. And now with the internet and all these, web applications that we can have access to data immediately, and BIM, I think it's all going to come together, and we're going to start seeing big changes very soon.
Interesting. In your podcasts and in your travels, you talk to a lot of interesting people. Who are a couple of people that are really interesting, maybe thought leaders or thought-provoking individuals that you would recommend folks in the construction industry to read their stuff or follow them on social media?
Mm-hmm. There are two people that come to mind, and one thing that I'd like to recommend just in general is for us to look outside the construction industry.
That's good advice.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can learn by immersing ourselves in a different industry, and project management is the common thread here, because you find project management everywhere, healthcare, oil and gas, high tech, and construction, everything. So it's very interesting to see how those folks are dealing with their projects, and see how can we borrow some of those ideas, because construction has always been the leading edge of technology. I mean, calculus, came out of construction. Like we developed these things so we could build things. So construction historically has always been on the cutting edge, and in the last century, kind of lost the boat. So and I really recommend we look into other industries. And one person that I had on the project management for the Masses podcast is David Allen from Getting Things Done. And the reason why I recommend you go and read his book is because he teaches you how to deal with your own mess as a person, and this is very helpful for project managers, because project managers, they manage projects for other people. So they are paid to deliver and to organize this work for a client. And I think it's very important that we have our own life organized. And David Allen is the top executive coach in the world right now. I think one of the top. And he talks about how we can take control of our lives when it comes to our email and our files and things that come our way, so we can have stress-free productivity. That's what he says. So I had him on the show. I think it was episode 3 of Project Management for the Masses podcast. And his book is fantastic. It's a quick read. And honestly, it's because I adopted Getting Things Done. by David Allen, that I was able to do podcasting and a full-time job and have 3 kids and do all these things that I do is because I use his methodology, and it's amazing how much it helps me. So that's number one. The other resource that I would share, the other person that I think everybody could benefit from, is a lady out of the UK. Her name is Susanne Madson, and she wrote a book called The Power of Project Leadership. And basically in this book, she takes project managers and people who are technically inclined, if you will. She takes us by the hand, and she teaches us the 7 keys of moving from project manager to project leader. So all that stuff that we read about leadership and how to be better leaders, I have not seen a better book than this one, and it's brand new. It just came out last month or a couple of months ago, and I just read it a second time. It's a fantastic read, and she is a speaker and an author, and she talks about project management and about leadership in particular. And I think we need a lot of that in construction. The construction site specifically, it's a very tense environment for a number of reasons, and one of them being that everybody there was the lowest bidder. So everybody's very nervous. When things go wrong, people start pointing fingers because any slip that you have, you're in the red. So it's a very tense environment. So if you are a good leader, if you have good people skills, that will get you farther, so you can learn how to deal with the situations. And I think we lack that in our industry. There's a lot of us, myself included, who are, they're hard-headed, and we need to have it our way, and we use our authority to get things done, and that is not the best way. So her book is a very good one, and she's also a blogger, so you can visit her website and learn what she's doing there.
Good advice. So that's David Allen, and I just looked at his website up, gettingthingsdone.com, and Susanne Madson at powerofprojectleadership.com. So I'll be sure to include the links in the notes. And I agree. I think that's really smart to get outside of our vertical or our silo, and lean construction is a prime example of that. That lean construction is simply an extension of lean manufacturing. It's the principles that Japanese auto manufacturers brought into the automotive industry, and now it's spilling into the construction industry for good reason.
Yeah.
And the sooner, I can't remember, I think it was Steve Jobs, someone along those lines, that said it's not so much about developing a new idea. There really are no new ideas, but it's finding new ideas from somewhere else and bringing it into a new setting. That's what innovators do.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
That's good advice.
Exactly. And there is that makes me think of another resource. It's another book I just read called Stand Out by Dory Clark. And she talks about strategies on how to stand out and be different. And that's exactly what she talks about. She talks about, okay, think about something that has worked in this industry, but they are not doing it on this other industry, and see if you can bring it to them. And lean construction is a great example, as you mentioned. And there are a number of other ones. But what I'm doing, bringing podcasting to construction people, it's not a whole lot of people doing that. So podcasting is not new. Construction is definitely not new, but the combination of both is. And you can always find ways to stand out by combining two different areas of expertise that way.
Absolutely. So you've talked about some really interesting folks. What are some of the most impactful things you've learned from the guests on your podcast, like David Allen and others?
Mm-hmm. There's a common thread among all these successful people, and I think the number one thing that I learned from these guys and girls is that we need to take responsibility for where we're going in life, for our careers, and we need to stop blaming other people. And I see a lot of that in construction. Things go wrong. The first tendency is to blame other people. But in a more general sense, as professionals, we are in charge of our careers. The tagline for project management for the masses is "Life is a project, and you are the manager." And I really believe that. I learned that from my guests. And so, stop complaining. look at your situation. Are you not happy? If you're not happy with your situation, the only person who can do something about it is you. And even though we live in a world that's well connected and everybody has a platform, there's a lot of conformity. Everybody's watching the same Netflix shows, everybody's on Facebook, everybody's on the same, doing the same thing. So it doesn't take much for you to stand out. It just takes a little bit of work, and it's all up to you. So that's the number one lesson I've learned from these guests, whether they're in construction or not, is that they are self-starters and that they believe that what happens to them is up to them.
That's some really good advice. It's interesting that that's the common thread of the people you've seen. It's probably not a coincidence. I would say that they've got a resourceful attitude. They don't come at life from a victim mentality, and they believe that life is what they make out of it.
That's right. The other really great piece of advice I got, I don't remember from whom it was one of my guests, is that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out with, and that is so true. If you think about your closest friends, most likely they look like you, they make the same amount of money as you, they have same number of kids, drive the same type of cars, and that is no coincidence. So one advice that I was given is to look at people who are ahead of you in your career or who are doing something that you admire, and try to surround yourself with those people, and then they will pull you up. And that's amazing how that works, and it's so true. So try to organize groups or in networking events, be courageous and go talk to the speaker, go talk to the organizers, and surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and ahead of you when it comes to career, and maybe have more money than you, and eventually you're gonna get pulled up by their influence. And it's almost like magic. I can't explain to you how that happens, but it does.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about the comfort zone, or better yet, being okay, being uncomfortable? Do you see that as a common theme with a lot of the folks you talk to?
Yes, and that's the other thing that I learned is when an opportunity comes around that makes me uncomfortable, that to me that's a good sign. It's something I need to do. When you feel like you're not capable, because that's what's gonna make you stretch and grow. And I think a lot of people, and I'm still there, but we are afraid. We like our comfort. We like to be comfortable. We like stability, but I always use the comparison of bodies of water. A body of water that moves is a river. It's full of life. It's full of fish. Plants and seaweed, whatever. A body of water that doesn't move is a swamp, and it stinks. So you need to move. You need to keep going forward and keep growing. And as soon as you find yourself stagnated and comfortable, I don't think that's a good place to be. You need to keep challenging yourself.
Yeah, I think I've heard a quote that all growth happens outside of the comfort zone.
That's true.
And if you're comfortable, you're probably not growing. So let's drop back to something I alluded to earlier. Let's talk to the manufacturer or the supplier. Let's say a manufacturer who has a product that they can ship pretty much anywhere in the construction industry. That maybe they have a safety equipment or software for the construction industry. What's the process for not necessarily the technical aspect, because there are a lot of steps technically to getting a podcast set up, but what's the thought process that you would encourage someone to go through to put together their podcast, to use it as a marketing tool?
Mm-hmm. Just to get the technical question out of the way, there is one resource that I share with everyone. It's called learnhowtopodcast.com, and that is a series of videos, tutorials that are free. It's a YouTube videos but if you go through that, you will be able to launch your show from a technical standpoint. You'll have what you need to know. So learnhowtopodcast.com. Now, the thought process here is this. The podcast, the show cannot be an ad for your company, because people nowadays skip ads, right? So nobody wants to listen to an ad. So you need to think of your target market. You need to think of your clients, not just your clients, but your ideal clients. So one exercise that I recommend is you look back at your portfolio of clients right now. Think of the folks that you like to work with the most, the jobs that pay the most. They're The 20% that gives you 80% of the revenue, the Pareto principle there, and come up with an avatar for that person. How old are they? What are they interested in? How much money they make? Where do they live? Things like that. And think about what is it that they are interested in, and then you think about content that you can create that will be interesting to them. Uh, so, so in my case, for example, Raymond Tech is a company that provides, like, we install cameras. It's not even construction related what we do. So if I were to create a show based on my expertise, which is to, link project management to cameras and making time-lapse videos, my target market is not interested in that at all. The only people who would listen to my show would be my competition, right? So think about what it is that your folks are interested in, and then try to come up with content. And when you try not to be always selling, it is a show. You're trying to educate, entertain, and inspire. And by the way, this is what I do for a living. So if you ever have a need for a camera on your construction site, I'm the person you need to call, and you can drop that at the end or at the beginning. It's up to you. But don't make the show about that. Make the show about the listener, and then think about if you are going to have guests on your show, like you and I do. That's another opportunity to reach out, right? Think about people that you would like to connect with, but you can't right now, because I tell you, once you are the head of a podcast or a blog or a video channel, everybody wants to talk to you. I don't think I've ever had a no for an interview request. So that's another opportunity for you to connect with folks in your industry. So not to name names, I've had guests on my show that went back home, and a couple months later I get a call from another person who works with this guest, and they mentioned my name to them, and it turned into business for us. So it's a very roundabout way to get work. So that's number one. Think about your target market. The second thing you need to think about is, because this takes work, it has to be something that you enjoy. So don't go and create a podcast because you think it's going to be good for the business if it's not something you want to do yourself, right?
Right.
And then the topics need to be interesting to you as well, because you're going to have to be dealing with this week in and week out. And there's a lot of shows that start, and then after 5 episodes, they stop.
Yeah.
And then have a plan. We're all in construction. We are familiar with the blueprint. So come up with a blueprint for your content creation. So one thing that I try to do is to have a mind map with 52 different topics that I'd like to cover on the show. And that's 52. If I do once a week, that's 1 year's worth of content, right? And so you spend some time thinking about that and try to maintain that every 6 months or so. That way you always have an idea of what it is that you want to talk about. And then you either, if you have the knowledge in house to do that, you can just do a solo show, and you turn on the microphone and you talk for half an hour, or you seek a guest to bring in that is familiar with that topic, so you can ask them questions.
Let me ask you this: is there an opportunity and a benefit for just an individual to start a podcast? Maybe they're young in their career and they don't necessarily sell a product, or they have their own business. Maybe they work for someone else. Is there a benefit to them having their own podcast?
Absolutely. I think it's even greater in this case and easier to accomplish. I'll give you an example. My project management for the masses podcast, as soon as I launched that, a few episodes in, I immediately became well known in the industry. So now I speak. I get paid to speak at conferences. I'm writing a book on project management, and really, like, if I didn't have the show, I would just be like any other project manager out there with 10 years of experience. But now, because I do this, and because my face and my name is out there on Google searches and things like that, and over time that adds up, I become a little bit of a thought leader in this area, having just as much experience as the next guy, but because I put my face out there, my voice out there, I get these opportunities. So, in the worst case, let's say our company gets sold or something happens, I have a rich, thriving network that I can reach out to, and they know what I'm about. They know my voice. They know who I am. So I absolutely recommend, if you have the desire, it's not going to be wasted time, even if you don't see the benefits right away.
Yeah, yeah, and that's talk about standing out. If your resume is on the desk with someone else's resume, and that person sees you have a website, and they can listen to your podcast and see your face and hear how you think and get to know you, lots of good things come from that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah. Any other? Let me ask you this: are there any other benefits to podcasting that may surprise people that maybe even you weren't expecting?
Yes. Yes, there are benefits. As I touched on this already, that you become a thought leader in the industry, and that is, I mean, there's so many benefits there. The fact that you all of a sudden start having access to folks that you didn't before. And the perfect example is David Allen. I read his book. He's a celebrity.
Yeah.
I read his book, and I said, "Oh my goodness, the book changed my life." And I saw him on Twitter, and he has, like, how many thousands of followers, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of followers. And if I ever were to talk to him for an hour, it probably cost me $10,000. You know what I mean?
Right.
But because I'm a podcaster, I sent through his website, I sent him an email saying I host this show. I didn't even have the show yet at the time, because he was guest number 3, and I didn't have the show in iTunes yet. But I told him what I was doing. I have this other show. I'd like an opportunity to interview David. And within an hour, I got a reply from somebody from PR, from his PR, saying that, yeah, he'd love to do it. So it just blew me away that I would have an opportunity to talk to this person for an hour and not have to pay. Not only that, they'll help me promote this later on. Once it goes live, usually people tweet and share with their readers, and all of a sudden I'm exposed to David Allen's audience. So there are so many benefits, and it's a love triangle, right? The podcasting and the blogging industry, because you have, in my case and in your case, you have the host, you have the guest, and you have the audience, and the 3 parties win here. Myself, the guest gets to talk about their craft or their book or whatever it is that they're trying to promote, and the audience learns something new. So there's a lot of goodwill around this, because the audience is grateful, the guest is grateful, and you are a helpful person. And again, people buy from whom they love, from whom they know, like, and trust, and that's a great way to become known, to become likable and trusted.
It is. It's definitely win-win. So speaking of the audience, one of the parts of our love triangle here, what's some advice that you might give to someone who wants to improve their project management skills? Maybe they don't have a formal education in project management. Perhaps they're a small business owner or a superintendent on the job site. Do you have any quick project management hacks that they could put to work right away?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, one thing is I'm writing a book for exactly these people. So we can talk about that. It's available for pre-purchase right now, and it's called Project Management for You. So basically, I took what I learned, because I'm a certified project management professional, right? So I had to study and pass an exam, and being a person in a small business, a lot of those things that I learned in that process I didn't know. And it opened my eyes. I mean, oh my goodness, I can read. This is really useful and helpful. So I'm not saying you should go and get a certification in this, but and studying for that exam, it's a bit of a drag. But what I did is I summed up, the basic, most important principles of project management, and try to explain it to the layperson in this book. So taking an idea from just an idea in your mind and turning that into a reality, and making a promise you can deliver and get things done. So that's this book should be available in the next couple of months here. It's about to go to the editor right now. And the other thing that I recommend is that the book by David Allen, Getting Things Done, is a great start, because he doesn't talk specifically too much about project management, but the basic moving parts are there, which is to take an idea, take something big, let's say the building of a house, and you break it down into manageable chunks that you can then turn it into tasks, and you can either do yourself or you can delegate. Then you can estimate how much of those tasks is going to cost, how long it's going to take, and you can add it all up, and then you can get estimates for budgets and for schedules. And that is what project management is about, is to take an idea and turn it into reality. So I recommend those two books. The book, not to to be self-promotional here, but I thought there was a need there for exactly this type of material, and getting things done. Again, it's a great resource.
Very good. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out some way to give away a couple of copies of your book, some sort of a drawing, either on Twitter, on the website, something like that. So I'll have more information on that giveaway at the end of the podcast. We'll put our heads together and figure something out there, because that sounds like a great resource, and I'd like to get that into the hands of some of the folks in the audience.
Yeah, you can count on me if you like a couple of free copies of at least the ebook. That should be easy enough.
Absolutely, that sounds great. Well, I appreciate that.
No
well, we're up against our time limit here. This has been fantastic stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the podcast. So, Cesar, where can people find out more about you and follow you and get in touch with you?
Okay, if they'd like to check out the Construction Industry Podcast, you can contact me through the website there as well. The website is constructionindustrypodcast.com. Very easy to remember. And the Project Management for the Masses podcast can be found at pmforthemasses.com. And both shows are in iTunes and Stitcher and all the other usual suspects podcast catchers.
What about on Twitter and social media?
Yeah, on Twitter, I am at Cesar Abeid, and CesarAbeid. And social media, I'm big Facebook, mostly personal stuff there, but I'm on Facebook. And on LinkedIn, I do a lot of LinkedIning. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I can send you a link to my profile if you'd like to add it to the show notes.
That would be fantastic. Well, again, thanks, Cesar. Best of luck with all the podcasts. Congratulations on the book. That's very exciting. And thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for the opportunity, Todd. It was great talking to you.
Well, that wraps up this episode. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Cesar. And do me a favor, send Cesar an email, go listen to his podcast, get on his site, follow him on Twitter, let him know that you appreciated the interview if you got some value out of that. What do you do now? If you like this content, you want to be part of the Construction Leading Edge Nation and get insider access to some of the stuff we have going on behind the curtain here at Construction Leading Edge, do this. Go to the website, constructionleadingedge.com/nation to sign up for the Construction Leading Edge Nation, or you can just go to the homepage, constructionleadingedge.com. There is a green button there. You can push, tap, click with whatever device you have, and put in your email address, and you will be part of the CLE Nation. And you'll get occasional emails from me with some of the stuff we have going on. If you are a Twitter person, follow me on Twitter at ConLeadEdge. Or if you prefer to contact me via email, feel free to do that. I like to get emails from folks. Todd, Todd, at constructionleadingedge.com. That puts this one in the can. Until next time. Thanks, guys.